Okay, welcome to week 7, which is kind of crazy, of college football primer. Um, we have a special treat today because I'm going to interview my good friend Scott Fulford, UT fan. He was at the game of the week, OU Texas, and he'll give us his thoughts of that game and the outcome. And so I'll keep my end pretty short. Let's just start straight up with my top 10. Um, Michigan is still number one despite the fact that Georgia just destroyed Kentucky. Um, again, like I need to see more than like one game of Georgia doing what everyone thinks they should do all the time. There's just been like I remember Auburn 2 weeks ago. So excuse me, and that was at home. And I think Michigan has just been they haven't played anybody amazing. But here's a stat I found actually yesterday. Michigan has played 313 plays on defense over its first 6 games. Not once have they had to defend a first and goal. Nobody has managed to run a play inside Michigan's 10. So when we talk about characteristics of teams and what separates the good from the very, very good to great elite status, that's what I'm talking about. Like if you're taking mediocre teams and you're just destroying them and like suffocating them, which Michigan did last week, um, then yeah, then I think you're doing a good job. So Michigan, and that was against Minnesota. I was like, who'd they play? It was Minnesota. So they put Minnesota, and that was on the road. Like they did that. They shut out Minnesota in the second half. So anyway, Michigan's number one, Georgia's number two. Ohio State had a close game against Maryland. And they ended up pulling away in the second half. Florida State was against Virginia Tech, and they dominated. Again, these all stay the same. So 1 through 4 is the same. Um, then where Texas used to be, we see a bunch of teams bump up. So Washington's bumping up one, Penn State's bumping up one. Um, Oregon was not ranked last week, and they're now in. There's part of me that thinks that statement is wrong, but I'll oh yeah, they weren't. It was Washington State. I had Washington State ranked, so they're out. Um, Oregon's in. It feels weird that they weren't ranked before, but I think I had Washington and Washington State in there. Um, Oklahoma is in. It took me a while, but I think they deserve a spot at 8. 9 is Texas. Texas drops 4 spots from 5 to 9. And again, like I don't think um, they deserve to drop out of the top 10. I think they ran out of time. I still think they've got the better roster from top to bottom. I think they turned the ball over more. I think there are a few play calls that should have been better, but it is what it is. It's why it's a great game. And then 10 is Alabama. So, and this makes sense to me too. Texas is behind Oklahoma and they're in front of Alabama. There we go. Um, Notre Dame is out. They can join the list with Utah and teams that I'm like, this is a good team. I think they're great. I think they're going to do a lot of things. Um, that loss to Louisville, even though it was on the road, really did not make Hartman look good. Um, Freeman, their coach, just looks like he had things together at the beginning of the season and he doesn't anymore. Or in the sense that, excuse me, someday I'll be like healthy, I promise. Um, it just doesn't seem like he's got things as tightened down as he wants. I think he's got the players. I just don't think we got the 10 men problem week before and then this. And it's just like we need to be doing a better job. So, top 10 1, Michigan, 2, Georgia, 3, Ohio State, 4, Florida State. Again, I think for the most part, um, that playoff looks great. And then Ohio State. So, if those 4 teams were in the playoff, it would be Michigan versus Florida State, Georgia versus Ohio State. Michigan and Ohio State are going to knock each other out. Penn State's lurking. They're going to knock some people out. So the way this is setting up, I really like. Again, I'm a fan of my own top 10. Who knew? All right. So let's talk about the games of the week real quickly before, because I want to keep everyone under an hour because Scott and I talked for a while. Um, best bet: K State is at Texas Tech in Lubbock at night, and Texas Tech is favored by a game and a half. I'm sorry, Texas Tech is favored by a point and a half. And Kansas State lost to Oklahoma State. I mean, again, no one knows what Oklahoma State is anymore. Um, they've been up and they were down, and I mean, I say they're up, they were down, and then they're really, really down. When South Alabama beat them, and they've been reeling off some wins lately. That is kind of like, what are you all doing? So Gundy's doing normal Gundy stuff of like losing games he shouldn't lose and winning games he shouldn't win, and he keeps his job, and everyone's just making fun of Oklahoma State. Anyway, K State lost last week in Stillwater. They go on the road. Texas Tech is 3-3 against the spread, but they're 4-1 the past 5 games. Is that right? I've got it up here. I may have done the math wrong here. No, I'm sorry. They're 3-1. I was like, mean math. They're 3-1 in the last 4 games, so they've covered um 3 of the last 4. So I think that's pretty good. It's in Lubbock, and I'll take Texas Tech anytime in Lubbock. All right, best nightcap. We have Miami at UNC at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ABC. Uh, this really was going to be like an amazing clash of two undefeated teams until Miami, I mean, had one of the most colossal mistakes, I think, in college football history by not taking a knee, fumbling on the run, giving the ball back to Georgia Tech, and losing that game at home after having the ability to seal the victory. Um, so I think a few people are going to play down this matchup, but it should be good. UNC's coming on pretty strong. Um, Drake May has looked really good. They finally have their receiver who is instated. I think it was Tucker was his name. That guy's a beast from Michigan State. I'm like, I should have done some of this, but yeah. So anyway, that game should be really good. You take that over. That game should be a better game than Notre Dame and USC. USC is supposed to get destroyed in that game, even though if they don't, Caleb Williams will take care of it. Anyway, you can watch a Heisman contender play at North Carolina in Miami and not watch garbage South California football. All right. Here is where I'm going to be like, no one wants to watch this, but I want to watch this, and I don't know why. Wyoming's had really interesting games this year. The most intriguing game this week is Wyoming at Air Force at 7 Eastern Standard Time on CBS Sports. These are the top 2 teams in the Mountain West. Wyoming and Air Force. Air Force is the best team in Colorado. Think about that. And what I love about this matchup is, again, we've got two. We talked about the nightcap is the top 2 teams in the ACC. I mean, I guess you could count Louisville, but um, I keep Miami up there, even though they had that one mistake. Um, but the other thing is Wyoming played Texas close in the first half on the road. Wyoming beat Texas Tech at home, and then Wyoming beat Fresno State, a ranked Fresno State, last week in Laramie, Wyoming. So they've got like a bunch of teams they've been playing that have really showed that they can compete. Um, what's crazy for me and why I find this intriguing is so I've kind of set the scene that Wyoming can hang. They can hang around and they can hang with kind of big boy squads. Air Force runs the veer. They run the option. And someone pointed out this as well. They don't have any scholarship players. They're all scholarship dudes, right? They're in the army. Um, so I love the option. Like I think it's poetry in motion. It's like, watching rugby in some sense. And it's just what you do when you don't have the best talent. You just have the best what's the word I'm looking for? Not precision. Um, you just practiced it to death. you've you've got the fundamentals down. You know where you need to block, you know where you need to pitch, you know you need to tuck and run. And the thing that drives me like even more to like, oh my God, what is going on in this game? Um, Wyoming played Texas close, beat Fresno State, beat Texas Tech. Air Force has a 73% chance to win this game, and they're favored by 10. So, like, that is insane. I just find that so phenomenally insane. So, I am very intrigued to see if Wyoming can hang with the option, um, and if they can kind of beat the spread. Best backyard brawl, I have Mizzou at Kentucky. I'm sorry for always putting these teams in there, but these are the closest two teams that are playing each other besides our game of the week. And again, Mizzou's had a rough few days. LSU beat them, um, and Kentucky got destroyed. So it'll be interesting to see these two teams and how they'll recover. And this is a night game, and Mizzou's at Kentucky. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Mizzou is going to show that they are a good team. And it goes to this whole thing like the SEC doesn't really know what their mid tier is. Um, so I think that's the best backyard brawl. That's also at 7:30, 6:30 Central Standard Time on the SEC network. And that's the other thing where like that was disappointing about this week. Like all these games except for one are night games. Um, there is a game at 2:30, which is I've already forgotten. Whoever Oklahoma State plays, that game is considered to be one of the closest of the week. And oh, it's Kansas. Oklahoma State plays Kansas, and that game is supposed to be close. And I'm like, I don't think anyone wants to watch that. So that's why that didn't make it in. So no one wants to watch Kansas and Oklahoma State play. And I'm shocked that I've already been talking for 12 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up so we can get to our interview. But the game of the week is Oregon at Washington. That should be a really good game. Again, I'm kind of like a Pac-12 homer this year because that conference is ending. Um, Even though it's in Seattle, the over-under is I'm sorry, the spread is 3 and the over-under is 67.5. So it should be a high-scoring game. ESPN gives the edge, 55% edge to Oregon. I'm all now on this like ESPN predictor train since they like got Oklahoma right. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are psychics. And I think one of the things is like Michael Penix Jr. of Washington. Everyone's kind of got him right after Caleb Williams on the Heisman list, and his numbers are like amazing. So like you have 133 of 178, um, 1,999 yards, 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But Oregon's Bo Nix, who I know he had like a campaign, but he's kind of been flying under the radar. He's got, excuse me, he's got 500 less yards, um, and one less touchdown and one less interception. So like, I know yardage is a thing, but that's pretty good. And he's got 10 less, about 15 less attempts. So Bo Nix has been playing amazing football. And the defense for Oregon has been pretty amazing. Yards allowed 255 compared to Washington's 365 um, yards per game. And their total yards are roughly similar. Washington averages about 12 more yards per game. So, um, and Oregon, the other thing is like Oregon's only averaging 153 passing yards against their defense. Um, each game. So I think that's going to be interesting since it's in Washington, and that's going to give Washington a little more of an edge to their offense. But I think Oregon wins that game. It should be really good. So, game of the week: Oregon at Washington. That's going to be at 3:30 Eastern on ABC. Backyard Brawl: Mizzou at number 24 Kentucky. 7:30 Eastern on SEC Network. Most intriguing: Wyoming at the um, juggernaut option offense Air Force at 7 o'clock on CBS Sports. Best nightcap, the slowly and I'm so sorry, Miami Hurricanes at North Carolina at 6:30 Eastern on ABC. I think that's actually, sorry, 7:30 Eastern. And then finally, best bet, K-State will be hopefully destroyed by Texas Tech and Lubbock by more than a point and a half. With that, we will go to my interview with Scott. Okay, I think we got 40 minutes. This is my boy Scott. He was at the game this weekend. Scott, I don't know if you want to like contextualize, if you will, our relationship.
Yeah, well, we met in fourth grade in Cub Scouts. So we go back a little ways, and ever since we were in elementary school, we've always kind of liked teams that hated each other, right? I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan, you're a Giants fan, I'm an Orioles fan, you're a Yankees fan. I'll pause there for a minute. Um, can we just acknowledge that I may have just gone through the worst sports weekend in my lifetime. Um, the Longhorns lost a brutal game to the Oklahoma Sooners, our number one rival. The Orioles, after making the playoffs for the first time in 9 years, lost both games this weekend and are about to get swept out of the playoffs.
At home, both games at home.
The Cowboys shat the bed on national television Sunday night against the 49ers, who have had our number for the last 3 years. So just you know, just try to be loving and gentle during this colorectal exam of a podcast. But
Yeah, you know I'm very loving and gentle. We probably have some of my students who are listening, but I think we because I'm constantly searching for a target audience, but I think we'll fucking say whatever we want at this point. So,
okay.
so and my mom, I think my mom just found it. So we're in good shape. So, okay, yeah, I mean it sucked. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I'll start. Is so you were at the game this weekend, um, and we'll kind of go back and forth. I mean, I've said my piece on how I thought this would go in the last podcast, but like, I talked to a few people, UT fans in particular at my school, which there are plenty, um, on the teacher side about like how they thought things would go, and like going to the stadium or like driving down or the week up to, like, what was your thought on how this thing would go?
Yeah, man, I swung from one side to the other. At the beginning of the week, coming off the win against Kansas, I thought that we were gonna win and cover. I didn't think we were gonna blow you guys out or anything, but I thought that we were gonna win, by a touchdown or maybe more. I thought that our defensive line would give us a really strong pass rush from honest fronts that we could then kind of play over the top of all of the deep stuff that Gabriel is so good at hitting. And that we played against a couple of mobile quarterbacks and been really disciplined in our pass rush. Our linebackers have been really disciplined in chasing down any quarterbacks who have tried to flush from the pocket. And I thought that that was the recipe to beating Oklahoma, right? I mean, Dylan Gabriel is mobile, and there are things that he can do really, really well. I think that if you take those things away from him, the rest of the stuff that he does okay, but he's not just going to light the world on fire. I thought we could take those things away from him. I was really confident in that. And so I thought that we were going to win and cover. As the week went on and everybody was taking that position, I kind of started to think to myself, oh God, like anytime everybody just kind of adopts this consensus, things go horribly wrong. And they did. We didn't get a good pass rush from our front. And when we did blitz, we brought it from the edge, and Gabriel just scampered up the middle, which was left wide open for reasons that are beyond me. And that was kind of one of the big keys to the ball game. Is just not getting a good rush from the interior D line on Gabriel, and then even when we did get a good rush, letting him run free and pick up key first downs.
Yeah, I definitely think the watching the line move throughout the week
Mm-hmm.
was kind of a fascinating part of the pregame. Like, okay, what's this going to be? I know that with the way we performed against Cincinnati, I was like, okay, if we're only able to score 20 points against Cincinnati, which I think for
Yeah.
all intents and purposes is like not a good team. Like they haven't done anything to make me believe that they're a good squad since then. Like I'm like, we're screwed. Like this is not going to go very well. That was the week after y'all beat Bama, I think. I think that was week 4.
Yeah.
Um,
Cincy and
so
SMU too.
right. Yeah, yeah. And even SMU, like I go back and forth on SMU, but yeah, I think both in both games, it was like, why are we not more effective at moving the ball? Why can't we get a rhythm? I think a rhythm is a good way to put it. But watching that spread, I would have put us as 7-point underdogs. So watching it open at like 5.5 and moving up to 6.5 was like, oh my God, okay, like everyone else feels the way I feel about this. And then watching it move back to under 5.5 at open. Um, and if you need to stop at any time, that's totally fine. Yeah, we're this is not a
Sorry, I was short interruption.
you're good. No, I mean again, for the two people watching, it's totally fine. It's all practice here. Yeah, like I was very much just like, um, okay, this is strange because in a big game you normally don't see, and you've been watching the lines more than I think have been watching Vegas lines move throughout the week, and I thought that was one thing that was really interesting, combined with, and I said this last week in the podcast, the ESPN um like predictor, the like
Hmm.
analytical whatever they've got
Yeah,
going
yeah.
had us at 55%, and that's what really got me like, I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, and the if I remember correctly, the line at one point was 6.5. It was at
Yeah.
least 6, right? I
No,
think
it
it got
got
up
to
to six
six.
and
You're
a half.
right. It's got to 6.5.
And I think that some books at some point late in the week got it touched 5, maybe very briefly. I know some got to 5.5. But it was interesting, and there was some discussion on the message board about what was driving that. And some people watch this stuff closer than I do. We're saying that early in the weeks when the lines are a little wonky because they're coming out, they haven't had enough action on either side yet to really settle in. That the sports books impose relatively low limits, and so a lot of the sharp money comes in towards the end of the week as those limits get a little bit higher. And so there's some speculation that, okay, well, maybe the sharp money is coming in, pretty heavy in terms in favor of Oklahoma. And I saw that too. And that was kind of right around the time that I was having a crisis of confidence saying, wait a second, maybe we aren't going to just like waltz in there and dominate, OU like last year. But
Well, so one other question on that is like we'll start getting to the game in a second is like what did you think of y'all's AP ranking going into that game, and did you think that had any impact on like the outcome of the game?
I don't, you mean like in terms of kind of the Longhorn psyche, overconfidence, or something like that?
Well, in the sense of like, if you were ranking UT going into that game, would you have them as high as 3, or would it be somewhere else?
I didn't have a problem with it being 3. I mean, I think that, one of the big themes of this season, at least the first half of the season, is that, nobody really knows a whole lot about the top 9 teams and how those teams should really shake out. Especially heading into last week, right? There were some questions about Georgia. They hadn't yet, whipped up on Kentucky. Michigan had kind of beaten up on some largely kind of cream puffs, and hadn't really looked spectacular in those games. I thought that you could have ranked, I don't know, 1 through 6 or 7 in the top 3, and I wouldn't have like yelled or screamed about it. I thought that Texas had probably the strongest resume of those teams. I saw a stat, and I'm going to get the numbers a little wrong, but directionally this is correct. If you look at, I think, the top 9 teams in the AP rankings heading into this past week, all of the teams' opponent records were around like 500 or worse. Many of them were significantly worse. UT was the lone outlier, and our opponents had gone, again, just direction like 15-5 or something, 15-7 or something like that. Well, we'd beaten Alabama, we'd beaten Kansas, and so Wyoming is not a great team, mind you, but they're not just kind of East directional university. So yeah, I had no problem with the 3 ranking, but I was totally open to the fact that other teams could lay claim to that probably just as well as we could.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting where like was it week 2 that y'all played Rice?
Yeah, no, it's week one.
Okay, and that
We
game
played
looked
Bama
like
week one.
yeah, like oh man, Texas is in trouble, and then Rice comes out a week later and like lays it to Houston. And so even that game where you were struggling in the beginning and then like the kids to bed, so to speak, like it was every game was like, oh, these teams that are traditionally not that good, Wyoming and Rice, were actually like uh punching above their weight compared to years before.
No, that's right. I mean, and the other thing too is that if we had been playing Oklahoma after maybe week three or something, where we'd had three games where we were kind of sluggish to start. I mean, I guess we played Bama in week two, but I would have been a little bit more nervous heading into the OU game. I convinced myself though that after 5 games, kind of the slow start and really strong finish was a feature rather than a bug, because one of Texas' biggest strengths, and or so we thought heading in this past week, was depth on the defensive line, not just really good frontline talent, which I still think that we have, especially on the interior. I mean, we could just send like three deep, and so it made a lot of sense that in the second half and certainly in the fourth quarter, when it's 120 degrees on the field, that we had fresh guys in there who could just take over games. And so I started to kind of think maybe this is just kind of who we are. That didn't happen. We dug ourselves too big of a hole against Oklahoma. Oklahoma was too good for us to climb back out of it. And then I think there were a lot of other things that went wrong, in the game. Again, we touched on, I think, one of the biggest ones with the defensive line not getting a good rush. The other one though, and this is another reason why I'm a little, more bearish on Texas, maybe a lot more bearish on Texas than I was before last week. It's our red zone offense. That was the difference in the game. We had 3 red zone possessions and scored 3 points. And if that was just kind of a one-off thing for us, this was the first time that happened. You kind of shrug your shoulders and say, we'll get them next time. I think I've seen 2 different stats. One said that we're 11 of 24 for touchdowns in the red zone. Another one said we're 9 of 24. Not sure which one's right. But the point is, we've been bad in the red zone all season, and that just crushed us. Absolutely crushed us.
Were there any other games that you can think of where you saw the same thing play out or where it should have been seen as a red flag, but it wasn't at the time? It just seemed like a few bad drives.
No, it's been a red flag for any thinking Texas football fan. I mean, anybody who follows team closely. You know, Sark even fielded questions about it last week, and it was interesting because against who we played 2 weeks ago against Kansas, we had the ball on, call it the 5-yard line. We ran like an end around to either Mitchell or to Whittington. And the play got blown up. 5-yard loss. Now all of a sudden we're 2nd and 15, or second and goal from the 10. And we kicked a field goal. Sark after the game even acknowledged, he's like, look, I think I was just getting a little too cute in the red zone. I've got to fix that. I've got to get better. So what did he do against Oklahoma? He called an end around to Jordan Whittington, and it just got absolutely blown up. He called it to the boundary. OU was overloaded on that side, and the play was doomed from the start, which I think raises another really interesting point, which is like what latitude does Quinn Ewers have to check out of plays at the line? I've got to think that if he had any latitude at all, that he would have checked out of that play in that circumstance when OU came out in that defense. And he didn't, and so I got to think that we just didn't have another play to check to in that circumstance, and that really held us back.
So, at what point in the game did you start getting worried?
I mean, right off the bat, right? I mean, second play of the game,
Yep.
Quinn, look, he played. If only sports worked like this, if you forget about the first 5 minutes of the game, he played like a really incredible game. He threw 2 interceptions in the first minute. That fumble in the red zone, like he protected the ball. You got to tip your cap to, I don't know if it's Billy Bowman or whoever, just I think put a helmet on and knocked it out. but yeah, I mean, when he just threw a horrible pass from our like 15-yard line, and you guys went down and punched it in for a touchdown, that made me nervous. When he threw the interception to Jatavian Sanders, it wasn't a terrible throw, it was a little high, and then I think again it was either Bowman or Peyton Bowen put a hit on Sanders, who unfortunately, he played, he was 50%, so he was a shell of
Yeah,
himself,
yeah.
and that was a huge loss for us. I think it was a huge loss for us. Um, but yeah, I mean, 5 minutes into the game, we'd thrown 2 interceptions, and you guys had a ton of momentum. Yeah, fortunately, our defense stepped up there and got that punt block for a touchdown. And that,
Yeah,
yeah, that was
yeah.
one of the hallmarks of the game, right? It's just the ebb and the flow. There were probably 3 or 4 different points where I turned to Noelle, my wife, and said, "We're going to lose this game." And then 3 or 4 more points where I turned to her, I was like, "We're good, we got this." And it didn't work out, but yeah, lots of swings.
No, I mean, like, I guess that goes to like my question because it's or the next one that I have, they're all my questions, but um the idea that like there does seem to be this and I think I know where it's going, but like how much of the play calling from Sark is becoming concerning, if at all? Because I mean, like there are certain things where like obviously some of the throws from Ewers could be better, but just like you said, in terms of how much control he has to audible at the line and some of the play calling in the red zone, like it does feel like some of the mistakes he has are bonehead mistakes um that end up costing the game for Texas. I don't know. Is that a bad read or
No, it is. It's interesting because on the one hand, I think that Sark is a really brilliant offensive coordinator in the sense that he can, and you and I have talked about this before. Like I used to get so annoyed because we would play Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley would just scheme guys wide open. Like, I mean, there would be receivers running open and there wouldn't be a UT defender within 10 yards of them because he just got us. And Sark can do that too. Like for the first time, probably since I've been, since 2005, my freshman year at Texas, we have an offensive coordinator who can scheme guys open like that. Maybe Brian Harson, could do that. Um, and so Sark is a phenomenal play caller in that sense. When you look at the beginnings of games last year, when we, especially last year, less so this year, obviously we started much slower. When we'd be working off a script, I mean, it was incredible. Like guys were just running wide open. Um, I think though that Sark in kind of key moments dials up sometimes the wrong play, and that there are some kind of just thematic issues with his play calling. Um, I mean, think about that. Maybe we kind of get too clever by half. Maybe the defining kind of series in the game. We get the ball, we run I think it was Jonathan Brooks, maybe got it down to the 1 yard line. I can't remember who did. And then, hell of a goal line stand by Oklahoma. And that was one of those points where after it happened, and we came up short on fourth down, I turned to the ball, I was like, oh no, we're fucked. We're losing this game for sure. And think about this. First down, we had lost our starting center earlier in the game. Sark decides that our money-making play with the game on the line was going to be to hand the ball off to Jonathan Brooks, who has excellent vision, but isn't like a big, strong power back. Um, line everybody up on the line and run Jonathan Brooks behind our backup center and 2 defensive linemen. Those 2 fullbacks in the backfield were T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. Those guys play defense. So second play, we line up an I behind Byron Murphy and, get blown up on the edge. Third play, we run the first play again, same play. You know, I think that Sark maybe even was kind of over reacting to being too cute earlier in the game and the week before in the red zone and saying, we're going to line up and we're just going to power this home because that's what we're going to do. And that's the identity of our team. And I really think that it backfired. OU was selling out to stop the run at least. And you and I are on the same page with this. We've talked about this any number of times before. At some point, first, in my preferably second down, in my view, you've got to go play action. You've
Right,
got to
right,
try
right.
to catch them sleeping, sneak the tight end out, and see if they're going to sell out and get an easy. You can get an easy touchdown.
Yeah, I think so. There are a lot of, I think the goal line, that goal line situation that when Texas tried to go in and in some sense like pushed all their chips in,
Yeah,
is emblematic of almost the entire game for me. Because if, and your memory on this is much sharper than mine, but this was when it was 27-20, I think. And
yeah.
is that right? And then so before that, and this is when I thought OU was about to run away with it, which I was like, dude, there's no way this is going to happen. It was 27-17. So OU had had a 10-point lead. Texas had kicked a field goal to make it 20-27. And then it's just like you can keep that momentum going, give the ball to OU, and then let the defense, Texas's defense, do what they need to do. Which, as you pointed out, is one of the strengths of the team. And I would argue that OU's biggest weakness is our offense. So you would put Texas's strength against our weakness, which is Dylan Gabriel, in my mind, even though he played a great game. So my question with this too is like leading up to this game, and this is where I think my OU fandom is going to start like showing itself a little more. Like there's always a thing that, and this is, I want to say it's all college football fans, but it may just be Oklahoma fans. Like Texas, I'm not gonna does their thing, which is like, and to put it another way, this is too long of a question. I'm sorry, but like Matthew McConaughey's out in the field and he's like talking it up with Sark and they're laughing and it's like, oh, it's the celebs are out and everything was back about that game, but like Oklahoma doesn't have a Matthew McConaughey or like a movie star it's just Oklahoma. You know what I'm saying? And so
Good to be
like
Keith.
no, right? And yeah, we got that guy. Um, and so yeah, he's
Yeah,
not out selling
Noel put
Escalades.
that. Noel put on some Toby Keith song in the car on the way to the Cotton Bowl. I was like, turn that shit off.
Right. We're in a no Toby zone right now. We're not allowed to play that shit. No, and it's this thing of like I felt like that was the e- both the play calling that happened and then going for it on fourth. Like could the play calling have been better? Yes. And it was this idea too, kind of what you're talking about is it's almost like borderline lazy. Like some of the play calling that was happening, which is like Texas is a better team and we're just gonna muscle this by you. And it kind of disrespected the OU defense in some regard. But the other thing was just like the idea of like, well, it's just we're just gonna make it in no matter what. And so my question then is like it it's probably not a great question, but like there's always this thing that continues from the end of the Mac Brown era is do you think Texas has a culture problem?
No, I don't. I mean, I'll kind of maybe nitpick some of Sark's decisions here and there. I think it's interesting. The way that I put it before is that I actually think Sark is a better head coach than he is offensive coordinator right now. In the sense that I think there are a lot of clear signs that the culture at Texas has made a total 180 since the Tom Herman and Charlie Strong days when it was at a real nadir, especially after Ellinger graduated. So I don't think it's a culture problem at all. Just the opposite. I think Texas has a really strong culture. I think that this was a real failing um, of scheme, and I think that on defense, it was interesting. I do think there was culture isn't the right word, but maybe mindset for this game is a better way to put it. Where most of the season, Kwiatkowski PK uh, has let our guys attack, and we just didn't do that this game. We played really passively. We had guys kind of just guarding grass. They didn't really seem to be kind of flying downhill. There were a lot of kind of missed tackles and hesitation. Jaylan Ford, who is one of the best linebackers in the country, just got absolutely destroyed. He looked lost out there, which was wild. And I almost wonder if Kwiatkowski just miscalculated and said, "Hey, we're going to play back. We're going to keep everything in front of us. If you guys get beat, I'm taking your ass off the field. You beat deep. I mean, I'm taking you off the field. and that was in the back of their heads because it just seemed like we played scared on defense, and especially that last drive. It's a pet peeve of mine, it's a pet peeve of yours, and it's especially acute in college where the clock stops inside of 2 minutes this year on first downs. A minute and 17 seconds is an eternity in college. And our approach to defense and sitting back, and wasn't really a prevent per se, but playing super conservatively was, I thought, exactly the wrong thing to do in that circumstance, because Dillon Gabriel picked us apart all game when we'd done that. So, but and I mean, to bring it back around more to your question, start on that going forward on fourth down. I didn't have a problem with that. I had a big problem with the 4 plays that were called during that sequence. I think that, right, given our running back personnel, Baxter's a bigger back, but he was dinged up, he was hurt. Spread the guys out. Let Jonathan Brooks use his really good vision, his really quick feet in the hole, to find to pick up to pick up a tough yard. Put Savion Red back there in the Wildcat, which already worked once earlier that day. Make them account for an additional runner, right? They probably know that Quinn isn't going to run it. He had one naked boot, I think, last week that went in for a touchdown. So yeah, I mean, Sark has been consistent all year that we're going to be aggressive on fourth down, and I actually am really supportive, and I think the analytics are really supportive of his approach to fourth downs throughout the year. I had no problem with that. I just thought that and I have no problem with the culture at Texas. I have no problem with kind of our philosophy of being more aggressive on offense and fourth downs. I did have a problem with the play calls.
Do you worry about any of the upcoming games on your schedule, or is it a straight sail to the Big 12 title game for a rematch?
Yeah, man, it's I haven't really looked kind of game by game. I think we play Iowa State at Ames. If that's a night game, those are always, they've got a good crowd. Those games can always kind of go a little haywire. I hate to sound like a Texas fan, but I mean, I think you would agree. Call me out if
No,
I'm
I mean,
being
like
arrogant.
I no, I don't think any arrogance from Texans fans this year is misplaced in terms of the roster. I mean, look, any team who goes into Tuscaloosa and beats Alabama with Nick Saban as coach, I think has every right to think that they could win the national title.
Yeah, I mean, and all, let me maybe complete the point because it'll dial my Texas arrogance back at least a little bit. I feel like we should go in and win out, maybe even convincingly in every game. I mean, this is a really down year for the Big 12, a really down year.
Sure.
Uh, that said, I also don't totally trust this Texas team to take care of business, right? Well, I mean, at the point where you can't put the ball in the red zone, I mean, that is a real problem. And there's some kind of systemic issue going on there. I'm not smart enough to know what it is. Something is going on there. And that is a real problem that could cost us a game against an inferior team. And we've seen it a few times. I mean, we saw it against Kansas, where we had like 700 total yards or something against Kansas, 600,
Yes.
650. So I mean,
I think it was
huge,
six. It was, yeah, it was over 600. I'm pretty sure.
some huge number. I mean, against OU, Quinn's yardage, I can't remember what it was, but Brooks went for over 100 yards. Quinn threw for
Mhm.
over 300. We moved the
Yep.
ball at aside from the first half of the first quarter, we moved the ball at will between the 20s. We
Yes.
could not move it at all once we got it in the red zone. And that's the kind of shit that can cost you a game against an inferior team. So, am I confident that we can win out? Confident that we probably should. I am nervous that we're going to just drop a game that we have no business losing, which would be a real heartbreaker.
Oh, I just got our 10-minute warning. So time is flying. All right. So, yeah, I mean, I think I don't, unless something absolutely bonkers, because you would have to drop probably 2 games in order to not be in the Big 12 title game. Like, does anyone else got a better conference record?
So what West Virginia is undefeated right now.
That's right.
I'm skeptical that they would be a one-loss team, and we play them. We play them. So as long as we beat them, I think that we could probably drop another game and still make it to the Big 12 championship. But having seen the way that what this team is capable of doing, man, I mean, limping into the Big 12 championship, even if we were to win it, but to miss out on the playoffs would be a shame. I would feel like it would be a missed opportunity.
Do you what would you put the spread at for a rematch if it was Oklahoma, Texas? Since
Yeah,
it's Big
so I
12
want to
talking.
get your thoughts on this because remember in 2018 when an inferior Texas team, and that was when Ellinger was a senior. Yeah, because that was the year that we went to the Sugar Bowl. Um, so we were a pretty good team, but we weren't a great team. You guys were definitely better than we were. And everybody expected you to win that game in the Red River Shootout, and we beat you guys. And I felt like in that game we played with nothing to lose. We played really aggressive. We hit really hard, and we won. I can't remember, but I feel like it was like last second field goal or something like that.
Points, yep.
Fast forward, you guys figured us out, and in that conference championship game, I can't remember what the final was, but if I remember correctly, you guys beat us pretty soundly. Regardless of what the final score was, you guys won convincingly. And look, like I kind of wonder if that could happen here, if we tweak some things defensively, play a little bit more aggressively, bring some blitzers up the middle, Anthony Hill, bring him up the middle, and move Gabriel off his spot. I feel like we're going to be able to give you guys a good run. So to answer your question, what's the spread? Assuming it's played at Jerry World, so neutral fields. You know, I guess if I were to make the spread today, I'd say maybe I'd probably I don't know. Maybe I'd have it as a pick 'em. Is that too much of a
Oh no, no.
change?
I was gonna say Texas by 4. Um, because I
So it's
think it's
funny.
so hard.
I will confess. I just backtracked. I was gonna say Texas by 3, but I didn't. I didn't want it to sound like a total Texas homer. So
No.
truth serum, you and I are I think on the same page.
Yeah, I mean I don't I for me the whole thing has been like I don't trust Dylan Gabriel and I think he had a great game.
Yeah.
Like all you need to do if you want to understand, I mean you understand the game, but for me it's Dylan Gabriel had 0 turnovers.
Yeah.
And that's why we won. I mean, that is in my mind the reason we were able to win that game. And it's just he's done a really good job of protecting the football. I just don't know if he can do it again. Um, and then we're dealing with college kids, and to be like, all right, you got to beat Texas again. Texas is going to come ready, and I don't know if we're a very young team. Like if the OU guys are going to be ready to go, but I mean, if anyone can get those guys ready to go, it's Venables. I mean, I think all the Oklahoma fans are kind of blown away um, at the turnaround this team has had. And one thing that's really kind of chapped my rear in the lead up is um, the way that everyone has referenced last year's 49-0 game. Um, as like, for example, even ESPN had a ticker that said OU wins for the first time since 2022. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? So first time, so in a year, it's been a year since, or yeah, or 2 years, 2 years. And so yeah, so that was stuff like that where I'm like, well, Gabriel wasn't there. Our backup, I'm pretty sure, isn't even on our roster anymore. It was a bunch of scrubs. I mean, the amount of guys we lost with Lincoln Riley leaving, and then Venables wasn't even able to finish a recruiting cycle. I mean, we were dealing with like an empty cupboard. And so it was interesting to hear people just blindly compare this year's team to last, but I don't think anyone, for me, and then we've got about 5 minutes, is for me, it's been the defense. Like someone who is a Giants fan who loves good, solid, fast defense with good linebackers, it's been so wonderful watching this team play. In a way with Lincoln Riley, like I haven't seen a team like this defensively since '08. So that's been one thing where like I they are the reason why I think we can do a lot of things as long as Dylan Gabriel doesn't screw it up.
Well, I think a huge part of so it was a huge part of the reason that you guys struggled last year was all the portal exits. A huge part of your success this year have been portal imports.
Right.
I don't remember how many you guys have brought in, but you turned over a huge chunk of the team. I want to say like 40% or something. Does that sound about right to you?
The number in my head was 30 players. I
Yeah.
wanna I think.
Yeah, so 30 out of 85 scholarship
Yeah.
players, that's a pretty sizable chunk.
Yeah. No, and it's been like I think Dion is as much as like, he's sucking all the oxygen out of the room and that has slowly subsided. Um, I didn't believe he could do what he's doing in Colorado, which is basically just vacate the entire roster and start from scratch.
Mhm.
And he's done it, and they've already quadrupled their number of wins from last year. And so it's really an amazing thing that the transfer portal has done is just allowed guys who are riding the bench in other programs or maybe not in a system that suits their abilities for coaches to come in and be like, hey, yo, here's our NIL deal. Like, this is how you'll fit in our offense. If you want to come, come. And then all of a sudden you just see results immediately. So that whole like give coach, and I think you and I have always been on the same page with this, is like a college coach should have about 3 to 4 years before you really start to judge them, and that time frame may be lessening in this transfer portal era.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, I think that coaches, you still need 3 or 4 years. But at the same time, I think there's a lot that you can learn along the way from what they're doing. Are they showing themselves capable of fitting, scheme to talent rather than just, saying we're gonna do what we do? Are they showing themselves capable, or maybe, in today's, college football, are they capable of going out and finding portal fits for their scheme? Or are they just going out and trying to snag kind of whoever the hot name is and hoping that it all works out. We saw that a lot kind of in the Charlie Strong era and in the Tom Herman era as well to some extent.
So we have
So
2 minutes left. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you're good.
Question: who do you have in the playoffs, and who is your national title winner or championship game? Don't put.
So I will take Washington. I will take Georgia. And I would not have said that 2 weeks ago. I mean, I'm kind of coming off some recency bias for the Kentucky game. I will take um, Michigan, and I'm going to take Texas.
I'm like leaving one conference out. Okay.
Yep. Who you
Who
got?
would uh who do I think I mean I every week that goes by, the more I look at Michigan, the more I love Michigan. Um, and they haven't played anyone great, but they hold them to like really low point totals and just seem to be able to do whatever they want. But Michigan, Georgia, Oklahoma, and I would go Oregon. I would go
Yeah,
Oregon.
yeah. No,
But
that's
I
fair.
do love what they're doing offensively in Seattle, but I think the defense on Oregon side is just a little bit better.
Well, I mean, you hit on Michigan, right? I mean, they were. I thought they outplayed TCU in the semifinal last year in a really close game. They had some really tough breaks, go against them. So yeah, I think Michigan's a good team.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate the call, and I'll let you know when this thing's up.
All right, buddy. Good to see you.
All right, take care.